German Chancellor Olaf Scholz just blocked a €3 billion air defense package for Ukraine. But why? With elections looming, analysts believe Scholz is appealing to voters in East Germany who oppose military aid to Ukraine. Chancellor Scholz's decision to block the air defense package for Ukraine highlights Germany's complex political landscape, where domestic politics influence foreign policy. This move risks Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression as it struggles to reclaim lost territory. Uncertainty around U.S. support and the potential return of Trump adds to the precarious situation, raising concerns about the future of Western backing for Ukraine. Will this decision weaken Ukraine's defense? What are the global implications? Stay tuned.
All right, so let's dive right in today. Big decision in Europe that we need to unpack. Huge. Yeah. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, he kind of slammed the brakes on a massive military aid package for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's causing quite a stir, to say the least. A lot of folks are scratching their heads over this one.
Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to try to make sense of it all today. We're basing this deep dive mainly on a piece from The Telegraph.
Huh?
It's titled, Scholz Blocks Delivery of Air Defense Package for Ukraine.
Right.
You know, this whole thing is especially sensitive because it's happening just weeks before a major election in Germany.
Yeah. A lot at stake.
And this decision's really thrown a wrench into things, both within the German government and kind of across Europe, really.
Yeah. It's definitely stirred up some strong feelings on all sides.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here.
Yep.
What exactly was in this package that's causing so much controversy?
Well, we're talking about a hefty package, €3 billion. And it wasn't just, like spare parts or anything like that. This was a pretty significant selection of Iris-T and Patriot missiles.
Okay.
Howitzers, and a lot of ammunition. This wasn't just like throwing something together.
Right.
This was specifically chosen to meet a very particular need.
Gotcha.
A need that Ukraine's been really pushing for.
Yeah.
Pretty urgently, actually.
And that need, of course, is for stronger air defenses, right?
That's exactly.
Because Russia's been just hammering Ukrainian cities and infrastructure with those drone and missile attacks. Right?
Yeah. They're just relentless, They're really trying to cripple Ukraine from the air.
Right.
And these systems, the ones in the package, they're designed to specifically counter that threat.
Okay.
They offer a level of precision and range that could, really change the game for Ukraine.
Interesting.
When it comes to protecting their airspace and ultimately their people. I mean, that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah. So given all that, why would Scholz block something so vital, especially when Ukraine's basically pleading for help? I mean, the article says that he called the package unnecessary.
Yeah.
That seems a little hard to swallow considering what's actually happening over there.
I mean, it does seem kind of counterintuitive, right? But I think we need to look at the historical context here. Germany's relationship with military intervention, it's complicated,
right?
Yep. Especially after World War II, the devastation.
Right.
They're very hesitant to get involved in anything that could make a conflict worse.
Right.
And for Scholz, sending these specific weapon systems, it's like he's crossing a red line. He's especially concerned about anything that could, reach deep into Russian territory.
Okay.
He sees that as potentially starting a much bigger war, a war that nobody wants.
Right. But couldn't stronger air defenses for Ukraine actually help calm things down?
That's a good question.
I mean, if they could actually shoot down those incoming missiles and drones, wouldn't that discourage Russia from even launching them in the first place?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the main argument from the people who want to send the aid.
Yeah.
They believe that the best way to protect civilians, the best way to actually prevent more bloodshed is to make Ukraine's defenses as strong as possible.
Makes sense.
And their thinking is a strong defense sends a message.
Right.
Like a don't even try it message to Russia.
Right. But Scholz doesn't see it that way, or at least not when it comes to these particular weapons.
Yeah.
And we can't ignore the timing of this whole thing, right?
No, you can't. It's really something.
This decision comes right before a very important election in Germany. Is it possible that he's trying to appeal to voters who are already kind of nervous about getting too deeply involved in this conflict?
Well, it's definitely a factor. I mean, German politics are. They're complicated. And then you have the rise of the far-right Alternative for Germany party.
Right, right.
They've really tapped into those anxieties, about immigration, and they've been pushing for closer ties with Russia.
Yeah, yeah.
So public opinion on helping Ukraine militarily, it's divided.
Sure.
Scholz is walking a tightrope here.
Yeah.
He wants to support Ukraine, but he also doesn't want to alienate the voters who are afraid of things escalating.
Especially in former East Germany, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They lived under Soviet influence for, like, forever. So their whole perspective on this conflict is going to be different, right?
Yeah, they have a very different historical lens.
Right.
And a lot of people there, they're still really skeptical about any kind of military intervention.
Yeah.
And their votes, they could be a deciding factor in this election.
For sure. So Scholz can't just ignore them.
Yeah.
But this decision, I mean, it's created some tension, right?
Yeah, it's caused some friction.
The article, it mentions that Foreign Minister Baerbock and Defense Minister Pistorius, they both really wanted to send that aid package.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the opposition giving him a hard time. It's people from his own party, too.
Yeah, he's facing pushback from both sides now. He's kind of alienated people on both sides of this issue.
So what does all this tell us about what's going on inside the German government?
Well, it shows just how divided they are when it comes to Ukraine.
Yeah.
What their role should be in supporting them.
Right.
It's a microcosm of the whole debate happening across Europe right now.
Okay.
Some people see this as a simple black and white issue.
Yeah.
Russia's the bad guy, Ukraine needs help, and we have to help them, no questions asked. But others, they're more like Scholz.
Right.
They're urging caution.
Okay.
They're worried about unintended consequences, about making the conflict worse.
Right, yeah.
They think we need to be more careful, more measured,
Yep.
not just rush into things.
Right, right. And then we also have to consider what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. Like, we can't ignore that recent counteroffensive they launched in the Kursk region of Russia.
Right, right. That was a bold move.
Yeah.
For those who might not know, this is where Ukraine actually took the fight beyond their own borders and straight into Russian territory.
Wow.
So it was a real show of force from them,
Yeah.
Real determination.
Right.
But it also showed how vulnerable they are,
I see.
how exposed they are.
Which kind of makes the need for strong air defenses even more obvious, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I mean, they went on the offensive into enemy territory.
Yeah.
Now they need a way to protect those gains from Russian air power, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The Kursk offensive showed how risky any kind of attack can be.
Sure.
And it really highlighted, underscored the need for really, really strong air defenses,
Yeah.
To protect the troops, protect the supply lines.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, a lot of people are looking at Scholz's decision to withhold those systems even more critically.
Okay.
It's raising some serious doubts about whether Germany is really committed to giving Ukraine what they need to actually win this thing.
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like, are they all in or not? It's a big question.
And, just to make this whole situation even more complicated, we got to factor in the upcoming change in the U.S. administration.
Right.
Trump coming back.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nervousness, a lot of anxiety about what that means for, how committed the U.S. will be to helping Ukraine.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, Trump's his history with Ukraine, his kind of admiration for Putin,
Right.
and just his general unpredictability. It's got Europe pretty rattled,
Yeah.
There's a very real concern that he could cut back U.S. military aid
Yeah.
drastically, or, maybe even pull it completely,
Wow.
which would leave Ukraine in a really, really tough spot.
Yeah, for sure. Which puts even more pressure on those European allies like Germany
Exactly.
to step up, right? I mean, if the U.S. backs down, someone has to fill that void.
Yeah. And it goes beyond just the military aid, too. It's about global leadership. Europe can't just rely on the U.S. to come in and solve every crisis. This whole thing, it's been a wake-up call for a lot of European leaders. It's showing them that they need to be more independent, more united, especially when it comes to Russia.
Right, right. But is that even possible with all the division we're seeing, even within Germany? I mean, it seems like, Scholz's decision, it's kind of stepped backwards.
Yeah.
Almost like Europe isn't ready to be that leader.
Yeah, I get that. It does kind of send that message, doesn't it? Hesitation, uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And, that could really embolden Russia.
Yeah.
Weaken Ukraine's position if they try to negotiate peace. Could even create more rifts within NATO. And none of that's good.
No, definitely not. It's interesting, though, because the Biden administration, it seems like they're trying to, like, shore up Ukraine's position,
Yeah.
before Trump potentially takes over. We just saw that $500 million weapons package,
Mm-hmm.
and then relaxing those restrictions on strikes into Russia.
Right. Those are big moves.
Yeah.
And I think they're sending a pretty clear signal.
What do you mean?
Well, it seems like Biden's trying to, give Ukraine as much leverage as he can,
Right.
give them a stronger hand if peace talks ever happen.
Right.
Because who knows what will happen when Trump's back in charge, right?
Yeah.
So it's like he's trying to lock in as much as possible while he still has the power to do it.
So you think this is Biden's way of setting things up for a negotiated solution, like trying to get as much done as possible before Trump could potentially mess it all up?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, Biden's been pretty consistent. He wants a diplomatic end to this.
Yeah.
But he also knows, negotiation only works if the parties are on relatively even footing. If one side's way stronger than the other, it's not really a negotiation, is it?
Right, right. So he's trying to give Ukraine the means to defend themselves, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Give them the resources they need to discourage Russia from pushing any further. Make them think twice about escalating things.
Right, right. It's kind of crazy, though, all this political back and forth, the maneuvering.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the war's still raging on. People are dying every single day.
It's easy to forget that sometimes.
Yeah.
You get caught up in the big picture stuff.
Right.
The global chess game.
Right.
But the human cost of this conflict, it's immense.
Yeah, for sure. It's really important to keep that in mind. Speaking of the big picture, though, that recent meeting at Ramstein Air Base,
Yeah, that was a big one.
all those international leaders coming together to talk about Ukraine, it sounds like there was a real sense of urgency there.
Oh, absolutely.
And you mentioned Defense Minister Pistorius's comments at Ramstein. What did he have to say about all this? Did he talk about, Germany's decision to hold back on that aid package?
Well, he didn't address that directly.
Okay.
But what he did say, it was pretty significant. He basically said that European countries are, actively looking for ways to fill any gaps in support for Ukraine.
Okay. So kind of reading between the lines, it sounds like even within the German government, they're realizing that they might need to step up.
Yeah, that they can't just sit back and wait for the U.S. to take the lead.
Right.
They need to be proactive.
It's a real balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, you've got Scholz trying to manage those political pressures at home.
Right, and trying to avoid making things worse with Russia.
Exactly. But then you've got people like Pistorius saying that Europe needs to do more for Ukraine, more and more decisively.
Yeah. It's that same tension we were talking about earlier playing out on a larger scale.
Right.
The whole of Europe is wrestling with this dilemma.
So it seems like we're at kind of a crossroads here. Internal struggles within Germany, uncertainty about the U.S. and Ukraine, caught in the middle of it all. It's a lot to process, to be honest.
No doubt. A lot of moving parts. And, Scholz's decision on the air defense package, it just adds another layer to it all.
Right.
It's making people question Germany's commitment,
Mm-hmm.
their leadership in Europe,
Right.
and what it all means for the alliance with the U.S. going forward.
Okay, so let's try to break this down for our listeners. We've covered a lot. What are the main takeaways here?
Well, I think the biggest one is that you've got a major European power, Germany, that's hesitant to give Ukraine these vital weapons, even with Russia continuing its aggression.
Right.
Scholz's reasoning, it's rooted in this fear of making things worse, provoking Russia. And that really goes back to Germany's history, their identity after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
But this decision, it's created this real split within the German government.
Yeah.
And it's drawn criticism from allies who think they need to take a much stronger stance against Russia.
Right. And then you add to that the uncertainty about the new U.S. administration.
Exactly. I mean, who knows what will happen with U.S. support? It's a big question mark.
Yeah.
And that just makes everything more urgent. It's forcing Europe to look in the mirror, ask some tough questions about their own defense, how much they rely on the U.S. for their security.
And what about Ukraine? I mean, they're the ones fighting for their existence. And these kinds of decisions from a key ally, they have real consequences.
Yeah. It's easy to get lost in the analysis, the geopolitical stuff, but we can't forget that people are dying every single day.
Absolutely.
And without proper air defenses, more Ukrainian civilians are going to be at risk. Their cities are being bombed, their infrastructure is being destroyed, their people are being terrorized. It's a humanitarian crisis.
So, given everything we've talked about, What do you think, what is the most responsible way forward for Germany and its allies? How can they support Ukraine without, making the risk of a bigger war even greater? And how can they make sure the region is stable in the long run?
Well, those are the million-dollar questions, aren't they? It's not easy. There are no easy answers. But I think before anything else, we need to recognize how complicated the situation is.
Yeah,
We can't just, oversimplify it. Good guys versus bad guys.
right.
It's more nuanced than that. We have to look at the history, the politics, the very real fears that are driving these decisions from all sides.
Right, yeah. It's
Ah.
easy to fall into those simple narratives, but the reality is way more complicated.
Absolutely. And once we accept that, that complexity,
Wow.
then we can start to have more productive conversations about solutions, how to actually move forward. We have to find ways to support Ukraine, but not in a way that just provokes Russia unnecessarily. We need to strengthen Europe's defenses, but keep that unity with the U.S. And the most important thing, we can't lose sight of the goal: peace. A peaceful end to this conflict.
That's a great point to end on. So to our listeners, we want to leave you with this question. Given everything we've discussed today, what do you think is the most responsible path forward? How can we help Ukraine and at the same time make sure that a larger conflict doesn't break out? It's a discussion that needs to happen. And we encourage you to be part of it, to really think critically and to challenge your own assumptions. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.